I learned two things on that day that the Clinton Library opened. I learned how much I could trust the people of Little Rock to not steal a car that has the keys in it with the ignition running, parked by itself in War Memorial parking lot. The other thing I learned is exactly how many hours a car will run on a full tank of gas before it runs out of gas. But that's a true story. I did, in fact, I had my elderly aunt and I sat in the rain. You all were there. You know how cold and wet it was to sit out there all that day. My car was really warm when we got back to it. We didn't have to warm it up at all. Thank you all for joining us. I know we switched dates, and so we have a smaller group today, but we are ready to talk about Peter and the Starcatcher. Let me begin by asking our panel to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. Hello. Hi. I'm Seth Andrew Bridges. I'm from New York City originally, and I play Mac, Fighting Prawn, Sanchez, Gremkin, and I understudy Black Stache.
Hi, I'm Mark Carver. I'm working here. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm playing Lord Astor.
Hi, my name is Hugh, and I play the Black Stache.
And my name is Steve Pasek. I live up in Philadelphia, and I play the boy who goes on to become Peter.
And the way they just introduce themselves, it's like they're all also like 3 a.m. FM DJs.
Bringing you smooth jazz all day.
Mark Carver on the wheels of steel. Come on!
But that was the smoothest, mellow introduction I've ever heard from a group of actors. That was great. Among our panel, the rep veteran in the group is Mark Carver, whom you most recently saw in August Osage County. Prior to that, was it art? What was before? What was between that?
Moonlight and
Magnolias.
Magnolias. Yeah, a little
Magnolias.
different. And art.
Right.
And yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now the play opened on Friday, and it continues its run for 3 more weeks. And one of the interesting things about Peter and the Starcatcher is that it is Arkansas Rep's first co-production with the other year-round nonprofit theater in Arkansas, Theater Squared in Fayetteville. Theater Squared is a 10-year-old nonprofit company. We have brought them to Little Rock before when we've produced the Arkansas New Play Festival, which we do generally every other year. They're a wonderful group. They are in downtown Fayetteville, right next to the Walton Art Center. They're in the smaller Walton Art Center space. They're in the process of building a brand new theater, which will take a couple years to open, but they're very up and coming. And as part of our 40th anniversary celebrations, we wanted to do a production that spanned our entire state. So to do that, we wanted to partner with Theater Squared, and we were in conversations with them for a couple of years about what would be the right project. They're a smaller company than we are. They tend not to do as many big musicals as we do, and their space is very different. The configuration of their stage is very different than ours. It's just sort of a wide open, almost like a black box area for their space. So there were lots of differences. So we had to find a project that would work in both spaces, that would appeal to both of our audiences. And so we were kicking around this idea of what could work. And Peter and the Starcatcher, which, and we'll talk about the background of the show, but it was a Broadway production that won 5 Tony Awards, was an incredibly dynamic and fun and theatrical production that lends itself to being interpreted in different ways. It's sort of what we might call devised theater, in that it doesn't require huge bells and whistles. The weight of this play is on their shoulders, the actors' shoulders, to bring the play to life. So because of that, it seemed like we could do it at their space and in our space, because it wasn't so set reliant. It had a unit set. And so this co-production ran rehearsed and opened in Fayetteville, and ran there the entire month of December, exactly opposite our production of The Little Mermaid. And then it closed in, I think it was the 4th of January, 3rd or 4th of January, same day we closed Mermaid. And then these guys came down here, the set was disassembled up there, it was brought to Little Rock in tiny numbered pieces that our set guys are calm now. But it was like putting together a giant, really, really heavy jigsaw puzzle. But they were able to put it back together. Some of the designers came back to Little Rock. The fight guy came back, the lighting guy came back, and the play was re-rehearsed and restaged and reassembled for our audiences. And then it had its previews last week and opened to very positive audience response on Friday. So it is an exciting sort of celebration and one part of our 40th anniversary season. And we're very proud to have these actors here and very proud to have this production on our stage for the next 3 weeks. Let's begin. Hugh volunteered backstage to fill in for the director to give you some background about the production itself, the story, the origins of the story, the origins of this origin story, etc. So Hugh, why don't you talk a little bit about the play itself?
Great. Hi. So the story is, it's sort of a great big collage of the original Peter Pan story that I think we all know and love about Peter Pan visiting Wendy and the Darling family. But then there was a book written by Dave Barrie, who I think everybody knows from his nationally syndicated column that was called Peter and the Starcatcher, which is kind of we're not calling it a Starcatchers. And it's we don't call it a prequel. We call it sort of an origin story, but it sort of chronicles in a very imaginative and somewhat magical way the action that takes place leading up to the original, the classic. And then it was adapted by Rick Ellis and Roger Rees out of New York City to be this live theater piece told by an ensemble of actors, kind of like what Bob said, that wasn't reliant on a lot of fancy sets, or it's sort of like, I guess I call it kind of actor-generated theater, where the actors play not only characters in the story, but environments, and sometimes we're the wind, and sometimes we're mollusks in the jungle. I think that should cover it.
Well, the play, it was adapted, as Hugh mentioned, from a series of young adult short stories written by Dave Barrie, and condensed into this one story that saw its first production at the La Jolla Playhouse in 2006. La Jolla Playhouse is a nonprofit regional theater, much like Arkansas Rep, much bigger than Arkansas Rep, in San Diego, and they're very famous for transferring plays to Broadway. Probably the most famous would be Jersey Boys, but they derive a lot of money from transferring plays to Broadway. But this play transferred from the La Jolla Playhouse to another off-Broadway theater, small theater called New York Theater Workshop, which is on East 4th Street in the East Village of Manhattan. And this is a Disney property. This was a Disney creation. And at the time, I remember I had received a letter from one of the producers of Disney Theatricals saying, and I'm sure he was writing to a number of regional theater producers saying, we have this new property, we're not exactly sure what we're going to do with it. You might be interested, would you come and see it in its workshop form at New York Theater Workshop? And at the time when it was running, I wasn't able to go, so I asked one of our board members to go. Many of you know Brian Bush, who is currently the vice chair of our board of directors. He said he was on his way to New York and he was taking his son Alex, who now is a professional actor working and living in New York City. And they went up and they saw this production in this small theater company in the East Village. And they came back and they said, and this was years ago, and they said, this was really an amazing show, so creative and inventive. I can't believe, that it wouldn't be a great success here in Little Rock. The play evolved while it was at New York Theater Workshop. It became a play with music. I had a good friend who was understudying the original production who lost his job because he's not a singer. So they added music, they made changes to it as that's what the tryout process is supposed to do. And then it opened on Broadway. And our director, Mark Shanahan, first time working with us, but Mark, if you ever were in New York when 39 Steps was on Broadway, you might have seen Mark in that production. But Mark had a lot of background with the kind of actor-driven theater that's required of Peter and the Starcatcher. There are, how many of you in the cast? 14? 12? 12. There are 12 actors in the cast, 11 men, 1 woman. And how many different roles do you guys play?
I think it's about 100. We say 100. We're in the triple digits.
Yeah,
Pretty sure, yeah.
Well, Seth, let me start with you. Since you started reeling off the names of the characters, how does an actor do that? How do you play so many roles? Is there one sort of anchor role and then you spin off from that? Or talk about the process of creating so many different roles where 12 actors are playing 100 different characters.
Sure. So it's, given that this is, as Hugh and Bob have said, sort of actor-driven, where we're not really reliant on, as Bob mentioned, I played 4 different people, and really it's just I add a hat and I'm someone else. And I think in a play like this, where you don't have the luxury of a full costume change and 25 minutes off stage to have the audience forget about who you just were, a lot of it has to do with physicality and a very sharp, clear change of point of view, inhabiting sort of as quickly and as specifically and as fully as you can a completely different energy. And just by adding a hat, the audience goes along with the conceit. Oh, now he's someone new. And we, in this show, set that up very early on. We start the show as narrators talking, sort of laying out the story, and one by one we all sort of drop in without the addition of costume pieces or really anything, but with physicality and vocal change. We inhabit these people who you're going to see us play for the next 2.5 hours. So it really plants the seed very early on for the audience that you're not going to see full costume changes. This person's going to put on a scarf and suddenly become a nanny, and then become a mermaid later. So through physicality and a vocal change and trying to really come in with a strong point of view.
Hugh mentioned that one of the creators of the original production was Roger Rees. And Roger Rees recently passed away, but most of you may know Roger Rees if you're familiar with the play Nicholas Nickleby, which was an RSC production, Royal Shakespeare Company production back in the 80s, kind of burst on the scene in the 80s, and kind of took the world by storm, where this small company of actors told the entire story of Nicholas Nickleby. And Roger Rees has since gone on and become well known because of television shows and other things that he did after his breakthrough production of Nicholas Nickleby. But that tradition of telling story through actors and through a certain improvisational element and through using just ordinary objects to become magical things is something that you've seen on our stage when you've seen the 39 Steps or the complete works of William Shakespeare Abridged or other plays that require the audience to bring their imagination to the production. And then let me pass the question on to Mark. Mark, you just, last time we're here, were August Osage County, which is pretty much the exact opposite of this play. As an actor, do you approach the two roles differently? I mean, you play, and also, with a few exceptions, you're pretty much, unlike Seth, you're pretty much playing the same guy throughout this show. I mean, except for when you're wearing a dress, you're pretty much. So is that a big difference for an actor to between something like August Osage County and this?
I don't think it is. I mean, and everybody's heard this, probably what I'm going to say, a bunch of times. And yeah, I do play my guy is so identifiable in this particular production. They limit the amount of things that I do, but I still leap into a couple little different characters. But it was a really different character last time I was here. But all of us are. It's not. I don't think the mindset is that different because, first of all, the words lead you, and the events of the play lead you where you want to go. And second of all, every single person in this room is this way on Tuesday, or this way in January, and another way in June. Everybody has all different Am I answering that question
I have no idea.
somewhat
I have no
articulately? No, but we're all sort of a combination of 12 different people. So I'm sure if so it's I don't think it's that.
So your process
different.
as an actor is similar, no matter what
I think
you're doing.
so. Yeah, and it's with me. I don't know how other people are, but me, it's the words and the story, and they tell me a lot.
Right.
And just to say these words, you have to go. Well, what do you have to feel to say these words? How do you have to be acting another person?
Right.
What kind of story do you have to be telling to say these words? So the words kind of lead you right down the path you need to.
Now, I was thinking, though, there is a through line, because both in August Osage County and this play, you spend most of your stage time talking to young girls.
Yeah. Just to review, I played a wheeler dealer, sleazy guy who had a fiance. This is the last production, but he was very attracted to and made the moves on a very young preteen or teenager. She was a teenager. So, but in this one, it's really different. I'm a member of the nobility, and I'm a father, and I'm a stiff upper lip, heroic guy. But yes, I do spend most of the play talking to somebody who's 13.
Yeah,
and
I'm
female.
just saying, I'm just saying
okay. That's the kind of roles I want to do
maybe that's
from
the
now
through
on.
line for your work here. I don't know.
That's that is exactly what was going through my mind.
It's actually written into Mark's
yeah,
contract
yeah.
that
That's right.
only.
Now, Hugh, you're called upon to make some of the boldest choices in the play in terms of bringing a character to life that, and both you guys, both Steve and Hugh, play sort of iconic characters in the play characters that we're going to recognize if we were to go on and see Peter Pan, because Hugh's character kind of carries that Captain Hook role through the play, although we may not know it. And Steve's character is called the Boy, but he gets a name during the course of the show, and the name is Peter, and then he gets a second name later, and it's Pan, and there you have the story. So, Hugh, talk a little bit about your character and bringing that character to life, and that you're almost unrecognizable without your ginormous
My stash.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Black Stache, to play a young Captain Hook is really, it's just such a giant gift for an actor. It's iconic. It's something that everybody knows and has sometimes strong opinions about, or they have an idea of what his makeup is. But what we have in this script is a very fully dimensional comic villain, which I think is so unique, because I mean, you see that in a lot of like children's movies and stuff like that, but it's a real archetype, the comic villain. And the one we have with Black Stache is so great because he's kind of easily shaken. We see him as a young man, so he's trying to be. He's got this great goal. His sort of super objective for the play is to be the baddest baddie of all time. But it's a work in progress, and he doesn't really. The first time we see him, and I don't think this gives anything away except for the first entrance. He comes in and he confronts Leonard Astor as he takes over this ship. But he doesn't really have his sea legs yet, and he gets a little motion sick and he throws up. So he's very sensitive and a little self-conscious, nervous about the task at hand, and very preoccupied with what other people think of him. So comically, that's like gold for us to play with. That he's monstrous and mean, but also very sweet, and he has a strange sort of bromance with Smee that is complicated and confusing, and it's a partnership. So yeah, those are some of my favorite parts to play, but it's a little schizophrenic, and what the playwright has given us is a character that I think is very contradictory, in the same way that a lot of the great Shakespearean parts, Macbeth, Hamlet, they all have these contradictions that they live with that actually make them, I think, more human and more interesting, to see somebody that's really angry and mean, but also terrified and paranoid and sort of a stickler about weird personal details. He's also like, I think it says in the breakdown that the Black Stache is suspiciously literary and well-read, which is really fun. So not only does it, you kind of get the impression that he like hangs out in a library, even though they're on the high seas, and he's got, he's just razor sharp about like pop culture references. So that gives us a lot of fodder as performers to play with, and he's an easy character to live with because of that.
You know, Hugh, I think I've seen all but one of the previews and performances so far, and very different audience makeup on the different nights. Does that affect, because I know that, you know, just like Shakespeare or musical comedy, this play breaks down what we call the fourth wall. You know, in a traditional sort of, you know, mid-century American drama, there's the concept of the fourth wall. That is to say, I'm on a stage and I've got space behind me, space to my left, space to my right, and those are walls. And an actor may create an imaginary fourth wall that allows the reality to happen up here on stage, and you just happen to be there, right? You're looking in through a window on a life on stage. That's called the fourth wall. And then there's a concept called breaking the fourth wall. And you see that when you come to a musical and the actor breaks into song and sings right to you. Or you see it in Shakespeare when an actor has a monologue, a soliloquy, or an aside to the audience. It's more presentational than representational. And this play, like Shakespeare, like musical theater, breaks that fourth wall. And I noticed that with your character, particularly of Black Stache, are you affected? Does it change what you're doing?
Absolutely.
Do you get that? And talk about the relationship with the audience.
Yeah, it can be a delicate dance, you know. I think our first performance we played for a sorority that comes to the Rep.
Yes.
We played to a sorority. Then the next day we played to a school matinee where some people were being bussed in from like 2 hours outside of Little Rock, I think. And then after that, we had our first preview for
Then you had
adults.
they had the snow audience of 70 people.
Then we had a snow day audience. So that does really temper audience reaction time. And also, there's such a different, wide-ranging scope of the comedy that exists in this play that sometimes a line that we've crafted very carefully that we expect a large laugh from. Sometimes that's not there, or sometimes I remember some of the jokes for the student matinee, the reactions were so big, it felt like a tidal wave breaking on us on stage, where we literally had to stop to hold for laughs longer than it even felt right for. But, you know, it's somehow some of those jokes captured the imagination of those kids, and they had an appetite for the humor that we serve up. Does that answer your question?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
No.
the audiences are very different, but also I think with a role like Black Stache, it can't be passive. The actor can't be leaned back in a reclined position. You can't play to exit signs, which is something they teach you, I think, in like public speaking class. You know, it has to be in the eyes of the audience, and you have to see the whites of their eyes, I think, if you're really gonna deliver up a unique connection with a crowd. But it can be scary too, because sometimes you'll see somebody that's asleep. Sometimes you'll see somebody checking the program to see if you were on Law and Order, SVU.
What's worse, when I sit up on the second mez, I can look down and see the little campfires of cell phones. You know?
Yes.
And I, to your all's credit, that doesn't happen very often. But inevitably, in our culture, you know, you get this little glow.
Yes.
And we can see you.
Yeah, it's not TV. We can see the audience.
Yeah.
I just always like to tell myself that, you know, they're probably texting someone saying, I'm seeing this really great play.
Our one female actress, Faith Sandberg, who plays Molly, she has a little mind trick she likes to play. If she ever sees anyone leave the audience and exit, she likes to imagine that they're doctors on call and they've just gotten a very important text and they got to save a life. that has nothing to do with us. But yeah, like you said, we can see the audience, and that's a whole other element when you see, especially with cell phones. It's a black audience, and suddenly you see a face underlit. It can be very jarring, and it's very interesting, because we started at a very, as Bob was saying, a very small space. Theater Squared seats like 170. No one, the furthest seat is 15 feet from the stage. So we hear you rustling in seats, and that adds a whole other dimension of, you feel like you're all in it together. Whereas the Rep is certainly a larger house, and it feels like we're able to breathe a little more with the audience, and that they're not in our laps, which I actually like a little bit. The feeling like I'm not being distracted by someone's jangly jewelry, or
The worst thing, I'll just take a little aside here. The worst thing, when you buy a beer at the Rep, we put it in a koozie. We buy the koozies and we stick the beers in the koozies, and that's not just for decoration. But what happens is the audience member drinks the beer, finishes the beer, and decides to keep the koozie. So they take the beer out of the koozie and put the koozie in their pocket, and then the beer rolls down the sloped concrete floor. It's happened during a really quiet moment last week. That's, you talk about our pet peeves. I'd like to glue those beers in the koozies. But I don't know why I just thought about that. It really bothers me. That and candy, unwrapping candy, that's the other thing that drives me nuts. Yeah. For some reason, you can unwrap a piece of candy in 5 seconds when you're in your living room, and for some reason, that same piece of candy takes about a minute and a half to unwrap in the theater. So do it slowly. Steve, let's talk about your work and your character. You have the real job of carrying the sort of iconic role. First of all, have you ever played Peter Pan in a production before?
I did play Peter Pan probably when I was like 17 years old.
Just like last year.
Yeah, just last year. Year and a half ago. But yeah, when I was 17 in a children's theater production at a summer stock company that I was working at.
And in preparing to play the boy who wouldn't grow up, did you have to rely, in other words, how do you do that? Do you have to do all the who's Peter Pan research, or do you just bring it right to who this character is in the 2 hours we share with you on stage?
I looked at it more as what it needs to be for this particular story, because Peter, the light that you see this character in is very different from the Peter Pan that you know from the story. That little sprightly, little fun-loving adventure seeker. Yeah, oftentimes a girl. So playing it as a boy is very different automatically. But the boy in Peter and the Starcatcher is kind of going back to that playing the opposite kind of thing. I actually have to play the opposite of this little sprite character. He is set up as an orphan who has no family, who the only thing he wants in life is a family and people close to him. So he doesn't have any of that, and that's really the story. That's the journey that he takes. Is I think why Peter needs to find a place like Neverland is because he has nothing. So getting to play the opposite of that happy-go-lucky, I think is great. So actually not even thinking about who Peter Pan is at all is more helpful for me for the telling of this, because by the end of the play we get there, we start hinting at what it's going to be like for Peter here on out, but it's a whole journey that he has to take to get to that place. So I really focus on just this version.
For me, it's a fact. If you haven't seen the play yet, one of the things that's cool to me, and I've seen Peter Pan. I've seen it on stage. I've seen the movie. We've all seen the movie version of it, and I've seen the derivatives like Robin Williams' movie Hook, and all those stories. It's so much fun to see how the playwright and how these actors introduce everything we expect to see. So by the end of the play, even in the last 5 minutes of the play, you're thinking, well, they haven't got everything, and then here comes the last piece of the puzzle, so you're prepared to really take off with this story, and with, it made me want to go back and watch Peter Pan again, because now I saw how all these things came to be. I guess the last one I had seen was that sort of surreal live production on NBC with Christopher Walken playing his really psychotic Captain Hook. We debated about whether we wanted to put Peter Pan in the season and do Peter Pan at the holiday time and then follow it with Peter and the Starcatcher. But we thought there would be, Peter Pan fatigue. So we didn't do it. And I still don't know if that was the right thing to do or not. But I tell you one thing we did do when we were casting this play. We always cast locally and in New York, but this was a 4.5-month contract. That's a really long contract. And there are some actors who are like, wow, that's great, 4.5 months of work. And other actors are like, oh, I can't imagine, being out of the city for 4.5 months or what have you. So Mark Shanahan and I were in New York doing auditions, and that was really on my mind in that process. We've used this phrase over and over again, but the phrase that I had said to Mark was, we've got to cast a mission to Mars. Oftentimes the contract is 7 weeks, and you can put up with each other. I'm talking about these guys. You can tolerate a pain in the behind for 7 weeks, but for 4.5 months, this is an ensemble play. This is a play that that they all come out together and share the opening lines of the story. These actors have got to get along and be a team. So this analogy of the mission to Mars, the idea that you're on a really long journey, a really long flight. And the last thing you want is halfway through the journey for the alien to pop out of somebody's stomach, right? You don't want, you don't want you know what I mean, right? It's like you just have to be careful that these guys really are who we think they are, and that they are going to get along. And so we were very mindful of casting not only good actors, but actors that you would take on a mission to Mars with you, that are going to get along. At the time we were casting, the movie The Martian had come out, with Matt Damon. And so, it was so impressive that these astronauts turned around and went back to get him, and that's the kind of actors we wanted, actors who would turn around and go back and get somebody they left behind. And I feel very good about the way these actors, not just as creative forces in the play, but as people have, now I say that not really spending that much, you guys could hate each other, but as far as I can tell, you seem to like each other fairly well.
Can I speak to that?
I hope so. No.
Got a lot of problems with you people. No.
The airing of grievances now. Yeah.
Yes. No, this was something that came up in our dressing room the other day, just between 4 of the actors. We said, isn't it incredible how well we get along, and how much that does, I think, aid in the telling of our story, especially when we come out and do the prologue together as a company. I just think audiences have like a sixth sense for synergy and togetherness when you see people on stage. And I'm very grateful that you guys got the combination right, because we've got a great team, and we really we've run into problems. There've been hiccups and things over the last 3 months or so, but never with personal problems. I've never seen an actor turn on another actor in our group. There's a real solidarity and loyalty, I think, between the actors in our cast.
I think especially because it was during every single major holiday. We've been
2
together.
shows on Christmas Day.
2 shows on Christmas, yeah. But that kind of need for family and togetherness is so in the air at this final quarter of every year, and then through into the new year, and then we're together all the way through Valentine's Day. So we really have to be feeling that family love. And I think that it just because of the time of year that we're doing it, it automatically was kind of infused into the group, and that is an important part, and I think it is in the show, and hopefully you can feel that when you come and see it.
When you come and see the show, you'll see a beautiful set design by a new set designer for us. His name is James Fenton. So this is not a Mike Nichols set. This is a set that was designed up in Fayetteville and then sort of repurposed and redesigned here in Little Rock. And the the designer and the director wanted a set that looks as if it could have come from a shipwreck or come from the bottom of the ocean. And so you get that sense of worn and weathered wood when you come and see the design, and pay attention to the intricacies. There's mosaic designs. Something that you hardly ever see at the Rep is a floor design. And the floor takes on a life of its own. And we almost, because most of the audience sits at a level where they can't see everything on the floor, we don't usually invest a lot of design energy into the floor. This play, because it opened in Fayetteville where the audience sits like this, has a special mosaic floor design that is particularly unique. And one thing that I think was kind of cool about where this set came from was that it is reclaimed wood from a Civil War era barn that was falling down outside of Fayetteville. And they tore down this collapsing barn and used all the wood in the set, which was another thing that made it adventurous when it came down here, and we just had splinters. But it was, when you see the set, you're looking at wood that came from well over 100 years ago, was a barn outside of Fayetteville, and now it's been repurposed. And there's already people calling up to ask us, when the set comes down, can they come and get the wood? So it'll end up in decorators' homes all over Little Rock. Jason Alexander, when he was here, he looked at the set and said, I could get $100 a board in Los Angeles for this wood. So,
Fundraiser.
You know, I was thinking, well, we did sell pieces of the Mermaid set. I mean, we're shameless in that regard. You know, people love that play, so we sold pieces of the set. The next thing is I'll be putting sponsors' names on the actors' costumes, but that's coming next in Bridges of Madison County, sponsored by Entergy. What questions do you guys have? What would you guys like to know? See, there's fewer of you, so there's more pressure on you. Yes. He wants you to use the mic, Corny.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and brought a couple of teenage great-granddaughters with me, and they thoroughly enjoyed it as well. And I love Dave Barrie, and I just wondered if there were some of those lines that were almost throwaways. How many of those come right from Dave Barrie? I'm thinking about the line where it says, said something, no man is an archipelago, you know.
It's a great line. Yeah. No man is an archipelago. Black Stache has this incredible language bank. His vocabulary is prodigious, you know, which is really fun to play. But yeah, that one's sort of carefully delivered because it's got to be heard, but it's also just naturally, that's the stuff that just rolls off the tongue of this guy. But that's one of my faves.
How much of it was scripted, and how much of it came out of the rehearsal process?
It was entirely scripted. So we didn't, the show is frozen. We didn't ad-lib. We didn't add anything. It was all right there in the script we got on the first day. Yeah.
Every bit of it?
Oh my God.
That's in the script. It's just repeated about 80 times. Well, I don't want to give anything away, but even though the show is frozen, like I said, the way we opened it, there is a moment in the show where I have a green light from our director to, for a minute or so, do whatever I want, which is a very cool and it's a cool moment for an actor to have, and a nice freedom to be given graciously by our director. So.
What other questions would you like to ask, or things you want to know about?
I was watching the show the other night. Your sword fighting scene that you had, and one of the props ended up breaking.
I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yeah.
But I have a question about when you're doing that, and with the uncertainty of the props and the way that things are going to land and the way that things are going to go, how do you, in the midst of delivering your lines, in the midst of still being on stage and being in front of the audience, how do you kind of play that out with your counterpart, but make sure that everyone stays safe and that the action keeps going?
That is a great question. I think I'm going to defer that to our fight captain, if that's okay.
Sure.
Seth is a stuntman in New York City as well as an actor, and he's our fight captain who runs our fight calls, which is basically like a 15 to 20 minute slowed down version of all the fights in our show, which we have multiple ones. Yeah. We had a little bit of a prop malfunction on opening night. And Seth, maybe you could talk about how we managed it.
If I do talk about it, it's only to brag on Hugh and Jason Shipman, who were the two combatants in that moment. Basically, there's a sword fight without swords. There's two sort of found object, very silly weapons that they're both using, one of which snapped in half during the middle of the sword fight. I think, Hugh, you were using it, yeah? It was your prop?
Yeah.
In that moment. And I think it's a testament to the ensemble nature of the show and everyone having everyone's back and all being together with focused energy for the 2.5 hours we're telling this story. They didn't miss a beat. They sort of took a breath, realized that the weapon was now 3 inches shorter, and accommodated it without ever stopping, without it ever being an issue. The audience saw, oh, a piece fell off, and they're still going, and now we're back into the story. It didn't detract from anything. And it just comes from them, one, knowing the choreography really well and having it ingrained in their bones, but two, being smart performers who can adapt on their feet, which I think this show really asks for from all of us, to be able to sort of think in a hive mind while we're on stage together. And they carried it off beautifully.
They did handle that really well. I mean, because I'd seen it quite a few times, and I saw a little piece of wood fly, but you didn't miss a beat. And that's what actors, that's what actors do. I mean, that's what they're trained to do, and that gets back to this ensemble idea, that if they're working together and they trust each other, they can roll with that. And it's a very different animal had that piece of wood flown, it flew backstage. Had it flown out into the audience, that'd have been a different experience, because then you would have taken everybody out of the play. That happened in Macbeth, where one of the swords flew out into the lap of one of the women in the front row. And that was an out-of-body experience for me, because for a moment I didn't know whether it was laying in her lap or sticking in her stomach. She was ultimately fine, but she was traumatized. And so that's a different experience when you engage the audience in something that goes wrong on stage. But in this particular play, this particular moment, that's why live theater, there's always just that little bit of edge, just like going to NASCAR, there might be a crash. That's, and some plays, as a producer, you sweat that more than others. Some plays just seem to have a built-in, there's lots of things that could go wrong here, like The Little Mermaid, when you take a girl hanging on a hook 30 feet up in the air and you think, oh, please don't slip off that thing. That's actually terrifying every night. I couldn't watch that scene. But these guys, and you see it a lot with Shakespeare plays too, where you really have to just kind of be in the moment, let something happen, and move on. And they did, and it worked well. What else you want to ask about? Sir.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for bringing the arts to Little Rock, guys. I really appreciate that. Tell me, when y'all leave here, when the show's over, etc., will y'all find yourself back over in the East in other adventures, etc.? I was just curious.
What's next for you guys?
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this before. After this, I go back to Philadelphia. I'm directing a concert, and I'm in a concert. Then I'm going to Germany for a month, and then I'll be back, and I do a musical called The Secret Garden at the Arden Theater Company in Philadelphia. And then I teach at a summer institute for high schoolers over the summer up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania. So that's my next 6 months after this.
I live in Los Angeles now, so I'll be going back to LA early Monday morning, the day after we close, to work with the arts organization I work with that's based out of Miami but works in LA and New York, called Young Arts. I've been with for years, and it's actually where I met our director's wife, Jen Waldman, who initially put me in touch with Mark Shanahan and is responsible for getting me here to Arkansas.
I'm proud to say I do not have a job. booked. Anybody needs any jobs around the house?
You need a fix-it
no,
guy.
I'm gonna go back to the Northeast, and no, this has been so. This process has been so involving. I don't know about you guys. Literally, I have no psychic energy to look for work. I'm going to read for a little pilot for Comedy Central in the next couple days over YouTube. But that's it. Hire me. Bring a smile and a work ethic. So.
And I'll go back to New York and begin the process of auditioning and hopefully get some stunt work lined up. And I know coming up in the summer, I have a recurring job as the head of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival's summer youth theater program. So I will probably go back and continue my work in the South. Spent a lot of time with y'all. But beyond that, as Mark said, sort of the nomadic existence of being an actor is you never quite know, unless you're Steve Pasek, what's on the horizon.
Hey, but just take a little sidebar and tell us about the life of a stuntman. We've never had a stuntman here before, so.
Oh, brother.
What do you do? Like, how do you audition? Do you like, I'll just fall off that building.
Well, it's sort of a very different animal. So I do stunts for film and television in New York City, it's very different in that there really aren't auditions. It's just about the network of people you know. You need a marketable skill. Everyone comes to it from a different background. You have former martial artists or high divers or gymnasts, dancers. I mean, everyone comes to it from a different sort of angle. I come to it from a weapons work and more stage combat point of view, swords and bullwhip and quarterstaff and all these wacky things I can fight with. And then it just becomes about getting on a set and meeting. The stunt coordinator is the person who is hired by production to choreograph the stunt and also hire those stunt performers. And there are about 15 stunt coordinators who run every film and television show in New York City, and you just try to get on as many people's radars as you can and prove that you're worth your salt and safe and capable, and hopefully they call you repeatedly.
But do they call you in like, you're the guy who falls off the 5-story building, you're the guy who stabs the other? I mean, are there like, if they need the guy who does this, is it that specialized, or is it like broader?
It can be. It used to be very specialized. You used to have people who did high falls, if someone's falling off a roof, or you had people who did car work if someone's, you're doing a big car chase. But now the industry is really sort of, once you're in, you try to learn as much about the different disciplines as you can. I come to it, like I said, from a weapons work point of view, but then you learn how to get lit on fire and how to fall downstairs and how to fall off.
How do you rehearse that?
When I did my fire burn, I went out and the stunt the head of my safety team, there were 3 guys on set who were in charge of sort of prepping me and literally standing by with fire extinguishers right out of frame to put me out. And I went to he had a 2-acre bit of property in New Jersey, rural New Jersey. I went out there for a day and got lit on fire 4 or 5 times, and then went a week later and did it for real on set.
Wow.
And I mean, and to be honest, and not to be like a tough guy, but it really was one of the easiest things I've ever done, that particular one. I mean, yeah, it's dangerous, but you crawl on the ground for 40 seconds and flail, and they put you out. It's much harder to get tackled and land on concrete. Anyway.
Allison has a follow-up.
Sorry, that's kind of interesting.
Peter and the Starcatcher is a really good play. You all should come see it.
How many times do you have to run through some of the stunt stuff that you do?
Well, it depends on the day. I mean, for particularly dangerous stunts, they usually try to limit the amount of takes that's required. When I got lit on fire, they had a maximum of 3 takes they could do, and they had like 4 different cameras on it. But sometimes, I've done fight scenes that last for 16 hours. You just, depends on how many angles they're covering it from, how long the sequence is, what the budget is, because the more times you do it, the more expensive it becomes, and so there's lots of factors. But, yeah. Anyway.
What else? Thanks for that sidebar. That's fascinating. We've never had a stunt guy up here before. What else would you like to know about Peter and the Starcatcher or anything happening at the Rep? What's next? Interestingly, at the reps, we have Peter and the Starcatcher. It is the first of 8 different productions we're opening at the rep in the second half of our season. It's the most we've ever done, and it again ties into our celebration of our milestone 40th anniversary season. So the very next thing we're doing is the premiere of a new one-woman show. Are you familiar with the book, The Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood? Book and film. The author is a woman named Rebecca Wells. Rebecca Wells was an actress before she was a best-selling author. She was working in Seattle on a play. She broke her ankle. She had to kill some time, so she wrote a book called The Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood. And she hasn't been back to acting since. Go figure. So she is going back to her roots as an actress, and she's adapting this play into a one-woman show. And she's premiering it here in Little Rock at the Rep for 4 performances. So you can come down and see the author, Rebecca Wells, bring her characters to life from The Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood. That's the next project. Then it's the regional theater premiere of a new musical called The Bridges of Madison County, which is based on the book, based on the film. It's a wonderful new musical. It's on national tour right now, and we were fortunate enough to get the rights to it as a regional theater. When I saw it in New York, I loved it. The music, I just fell in love with the music. It's one of the best music to any musical theater work I've ever heard, and I really lobbied hard to get the rights. And we got the rights because one of the producers is from, the Broadway producers is from Little Rock. His name is Rem Dickinson, and Rem was one of the producers in New York, and he's helping us with our production, and we're very excited about doing the regional theater premiere of Bridges of Madison County. That's happening just after the Ya-Ya Sisterhood. Then also on our main stage is the return of Second City, America's favorite comedy improv troupe. We're producing Ballet Arkansas for a week. Their spring repertoire is on our stage. Then we do our final production of the season, which is the world premiere of a new play called Windfall, which is being directed by Jason Alexander, whom you may know from the television show Seinfeld, but who's also a Tony-winning actor and a wonderful human being. And so we're premiering this dark comedy as the final production of our season. In our 40th season, we wanted to start with Shakespeare and end with the world premiere of a new play. So we really wanted to represent what we do best as a theater company and what we think we contribute to the cultural landscape of Arkansas. So those are the bookends of our season. And we also have 2 productions that we're doing in our new space. We just opened a 120-seat theater. It's called a black box in that it's just a room where the seats can move around. That we are very excited about. It's a new education space for us, but the ground floor has a small theater. We're doing 2 productions in there this spring. We're doing a play called An Iliad, which is a modern retelling of Homer's The Iliad, and it's a story about warfare, and coming home from war. We have a National Endowment for the Arts grant for that production, where we'll be bringing Arkansas veterans in to talk about their experiences in combat. There were over 250,000 Arkansas veterans living in our state, and so we wanted to engage that community. So we've got this very dynamic play starring Joe Graves, one of the Rep's favorite actors. We wanted Joe to be a part of our 40th season. Joe's done over 12 productions at the Rep. And so Joe will be doing this one-man show called An Iliad. And then we're bringing in a production that was actually written in Britain called Clinton Hercules, which is a one-man show about Bill Clinton, which is really quite wonderful, that compares our former president and a man that we love to a character in a Greek play called The Curate Troy, written by an Irish poet, Seamus Heaney. So it's an interesting, wonderful play, one-man show that we're doing for only 4 performances in the spring. So those 2 plays are happening in our black box, and 6 productions are happening on our main stage, and that's a really long answer to your question. But that is what we're doing next. And we hope you'll come and see. It's very ambitious, but you know, when you're celebrating 40, you only turn 40 once, and you want to make a big deal about it, and so that's what we're doing. And I can see now from the clock on the wall that it's time for us to wrap up. I want to thank you guys for being here today, and I want to thank our panel for coming down and talking. And they have a show. Do you have a show tonight? Yeah. They have a show tonight, and I hope you'll come down and see Peter and the Starcatcher. It is a comedy for the entire family. We've had 6-year-olds come and love it. We've had 80-year-olds come and love it. It is a really a wonderful comedy for everybody. So I hope you'll come down and see it soon. Thank you all for being here today.